Hi guys, welcome to Wahala Nade, the home of African movie recaps. Let's get straight into the Wahala.
This movie is called The Wedding Planner. The movie begins with Annabelle and Greg planning for their wedding, so Annabelle engages a wedding planner, Adora, to assist in the arrangement. When Adora and Greg meet, a shocking look flashes on their faces, but they both lie to Annabelle when she asks if they know each other. Not convinced, Annabelle confronts Greg about knowing Adora, but Greg is scared of answering her, so he walks out. Later, Greg meets Adora, who also has burning questions of why Greg abandoned her. It's revealed that Adora is Greg's ex-fiancée. Greg explains that when he returned from abroad, he looked for Adora. Unfortunately, Adora had already moved after a car accident she was involved in that took her parents' lives. But what Greg had been told contradicted what she was telling him because he was told she died while aborting their child. In truth, Adora had lost their child during the accident. When Greg returns home, he faces a nagging Annabelle who continues annoying him. Adora's love life isn't all roses as well as she is in an abusive relationship with Michael. Talking to Alex, Greg informs him that he has finally found Adora, but Alex advises Greg that Adora is his past and that he should focus on his wedding with Annabelle. The next day, Adora comes to get wedding preparation details when she bumps into Greg as she leaves. He offers her a ride home which she accepts. Arriving at Adora's place, Greg notices an injury on her hand, but she makes up a lie. But when Greg tries to make a conversation with her, Adora cations him and exits his car. Greg is left silent and leaves. The reappearance of Greg in Adora's life has made her disoriented, which her best friend, Dee, notices. It also made Greg more confused about his wedding arrangement with Annabelle. One day, Adora was looking at Greg's picture when Michael caught her. She tries to explain he is a client, but Michael becomes defensive, insults her insinuating that she sleeps with her client, and almost hits her. In Greg's house, Greg and Annabelle's relationship is crumbling. It becomes worse when Greg chooses to prioritize Adora's call. Based on the call, something is wrong with Adora. So, Greg rushes over to her place, leaving Annabelle mad. A frustrated Adora is not happy being Greg's wedding planner, but Greg notices her health is weak and chooses to help her. Night comes and Greg has not returned home, which makes Annabelle call his colleagues and office in search of him. With no one knowing his whereabouts, Annabelle becomes more frustrated. On the other hand, Greg is sitting by Adora as she sleeps. When she wakes up, she requests for Greg to leave and he does. But in the morning, Michael enters screaming at Adora as he has found out that Greg was in her house the whole night. Adora remains silent, not wanting to aggravate the situation. Finally, Greg arrives home to an angry Annabelle. He lies about being at work, but Annabelle doesn't buy his excuse. As she continues confronting him, Greg walks out on her. The next day, Dee confronts Adora about the abuse from Michael, but Adora defends Michael's action as she feels like owes him her life after he saved her during the accident. Dee disputes Adora's thinking and confronts Michael. Michael becomes defensive and tries to threaten Dee, but she stands up to him, which rattles Michael up. The next day, Greg and Adora are laughing together when Annabelle enters and they stop. While discussing the wedding arrangement, Adora is placed in an awkward situation. Greg wants Adora to choose the color of his suit while ignoring Annabelle's suggestion. This annoys Annabelle. But trouble comes her way when Adora receives numerous credit notifications. Michael has spent her money. When she confronts him, Michael gets defensive and throws her credit card at her. Adora is heartbroken. Even in Greg's house, Greg and Annabelle are still arguing about Greg's behavior around Adora, but Greg calms Annabelle down. Back in Adora's house, Dee finds out about Michael's deeds. It's revealed that he has spent all her money, including her business funds. Dee tries to lend her help, but Adora is too proud to accept. At this point, Adora isn't picking up Annabelle's calls, which frustrates Annabelle. Greg even visits Adora and finds out she has lost all her money. Another offer for help comes from Greg, but she refuses it. Shockingly, Dee still finds Michael in Adora's house after what he did, so she confronts him. Michael tries to scare her, but Dee won't back down. Changing his tactics, Michael denies spending Adora's money, but Dee has seen him spending the money on other women. Scared, Michael tries to plead with Dee not to tell Adora, but Dee just walks out. Still scared, Michael is listening to Adora and Dee's conversation. Adora has decided to take a loan to replace the money Michael has spent, but Dee is against this decision. So Dee decides to give her the money and Adora is grateful. At this point, even with Alex's advice, Greg is more confused than ever about Adora and Annabelle. Wendy, Annabelle's best friend, comes into town. Annabelle confides in her about Adora not picking up her calls, so Wendy advises her to get Adora arrested, which Annabelle tells Greg. But Greg is against this action, and Annabelle and Greg argue about Greg always defending Adora even though he later calms her down. The next day, Greg visits Adora only to find her covered in scars. Inquired, Adora confides in Greg about Michael's abusive nature. Angry, Greg stomps out of Adora's house and goes looking for Michael to confront him, and they end up in a fight. Greg returns home injured, scaring Annabelle. On the other hand, Michael goes lashing at Adora. Annabelle's frustration increases about Greg's changed behavior, and she seeks help from Wendy. The next day, Adora pleads for Dee to help get Michael to come out of her room as he has locked himself up the whole night, but Dee only laughs. A knock at the door interrupts their conversation. It is Wendy. She has come to warn Adora to fix everything between Annabelle and Greg, to which Adora complies. As Wendy was leaving, she saw Greg visit Adora even though Adora never allowed him into her house because Michael was around. Greg had come to give her a check to help with her situation before storming out mad. Not knowing the actual events, Wendy tells Annabelle what she saw and even shows Annabelle pics of Greg and Adora together at Adora's place. Annabelle is left in tears as Wendy tries to calm her down, promising to make Adora and Greg pay. When Greg arrives home, Annabelle confronts him about his relationship with Adora, showing him the pictures Wendy showed her. The two argue, leading to Greg putting a hold on their wedding plans, leaving Annabelle devastated. In Adora's house, Michael apologizes to Adora, but she is completely fed up with Michael and ends their relationship. As usual, Michael turns defensive and insults Adora. When Adora asks him to leave, Michael changes his tactics again and begs Adora. But Adora threatens to hit him with a lamp. He leaves. With the wedding on hold, Annabelle packs her things and leaves. Greg returns home to find Annabelle gone, so he informs Alex. Alex goes looking for Annabelle to convince her to return to Greg, only for him to let the cat out of the bag that Adora is Greg's ex. With this information, Annabelle ends the whole relationship. Out of options, Michael goes to Greg's house to blame him for ruining his relationship and even insinuates that Adora must be in his house. But when Greg threatens to call security, Michael leaves. The next day, Adora receives pictures of Greg and her from Annabelle. When she tries to call Annabelle, Annabelle hangs up on her. So, Adora goes looking for Annabelle to rectify any misunderstanding, only to find out that Annabelle has left Greg. Frustrated, Adora leaves. At the losing end, Michael meets up with Annabelle and they end up hooking up, while Greg has decided to bring Adora back into his life. Michael and Annabelle are together, But disaster strikes as Michael has absconded with all of Annabelle's property and money. And Adora has accepted a date with Greg. Surprisingly, Greg proposes to Adora and she accepts. The moral of the movie is you don't have to give everything to please someone, no matter how much you owe them.